you are in the construction industry, which to this day, how do you feel we can change that? Number one. And as women that, as we continue to evolve in our industries, how can we help the next generation so that they don't have to have the same struggles that we have had?
Do a shift, a pivot, and open my own business. And then it takes them probably 5 years.
Right.
To ramp up, to get, bootstrap something, to start, a small business to see if it flourishes. And it's such a vulnerable time because you're raising a child, you're trying to raise a business, or you're trying to go back to work to sustain the fact that you want to create a business.
Right.
One of the hardest, most, I want to say not critical, pivotal moments of my life of defining who I was when in the eyes of society, I was not a mom. But in my heart and in my physical being, I still very much felt like a mom. 2 children, 4 years, the pandemic happening, for me to hear her story on a live on how she was honoring her own daughter, Sabrina. And I remember thinking to myself, she is creating this jewelry and she is living in her purpose and she's turned her pain into purpose.
Mothers are the best project managers. That is what we do every single day.
Yeah.
And because I have to juggle their calendars, all of their activities, the finance, not that this is the experience for everyone, but I can speak for myself. I have to manage, what we're eating, what we're purchasing, what is going on the weekends. We are essentially the best project managers because we have to do that. Today on the FoundHers Circle podcast, we are joined by Denise Castro. She is a force. She's a mom, she's an entrepreneur, and she shares her journey in the construction industry. She has built a beautiful community, and I know that you will find value in this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me. I know we kind of just jumped right in. Yes. I'm so happy to have you here. Like you said, you do wear many hats, and tell us a little bit about what you do and how you became a founder.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I call myself the accidental contractor. This was not something I had planned. Back in 2009, I was in the marketing space, so I started working for a couple of large GCs. I was a marketing analyst for a little while, making everyone look good on their presentations when we were going after projects and the anatomy of deals, right? And I sort of was thinking to myself, why is it that I'm always behind the screens, kind of putting everything together? Why am I not at the forefront of everything that I'm creating, market myself? I know the industry really well. I had, 15 years up till now in experience, and there weren't a lot of women talking about bidding work. There weren't a lot of women on site, as
even to this day, I think there's
we're a little better, but we could be doing more. And I was like, this is kind of crazy. I just am, sort of advertising how wonderful it is to build these projects, and there's not enough women, there's not enough mothers in the spaces that I'm representing. So I was like, I'm gonna start changing the way that I want my narrative to speak to others. And I decided, I'm going to start this community during the pandemic. This is where Virtual Mom Collective was born. And it was a humble Facebook group. And our first webinar was it was crashed by Zoom because so many people joined. And it was just because a lot of women were just drowning and trying to do their jobs, drowning and just trying to figure out who they were in the spaces of staying at home. And I was pregnant during the pandemic. That was not planned. Another one of those things where it was becoming another version of myself, where I thought, what's more important and more labor intensive than creating a family so that, your job can not be everything that encompasses your day to day. I wanted my family to feel like, this job is something that she's passionate about. It's not just a 9 to 5. So I had the opportunity after the pandemic. The previous owners of Nucor were like, we don't want to do this anymore. We don't want to build. We want to do masonry. We don't. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, you're going to close the company? Or no, you guys can buy it from us. Or it was me and my partner. And I thought to myself, oh my God, like, am I ready? Do I buy in? Can I be the face of the company? I've been building this pipeline. So I asked myself, like, why am I questioning something that I've been doing for quite some time for others, and if not for myself? So, I'm the minority shareholder. I bought into the company. And then Virtual Mom Collective also was born side by side, and it became a movement. Like, people started joining, people started donating to like our events. We have our summit coming up now in March. It's at FIU. What we do is 3 things. It's like the 3 pillars. We provide financial resources through Mother Mentor grants for any woman who finds themselves in between jobs. They need some sort of FMLA assistance, anything to get them to the next point. Maybe they want to start their own business. Maybe they want to invest in something, invest themselves, because there's no better, investment for a mom than in her family and herself.
Right. That's amazing.
So, we're fast forward 5 years. We're a nationally recognized nonprofit. We serve about 3,000 women in the South Florida area. We became, something that, like a 3rd, 4th child, which I never expected, but it is one of the cornerstones of the triangle where in my life, I never felt like, it's not that I didn't have the support system. It's just that the support system for me and the way that I parent wasn't really readily available. It was something I needed to create because, in Hispanics, and I'm not sure if you're Hispanic, we kind of have to bridge the gap between what the generation requires of being a parent today and take a little piece of like what works from the past and integrate it in the day-to-day, because the way that my grandmother mothered my mother doesn't work for me, and the way that my mother mothered me, it's not going to with the way that I want to mother my children, in many ways.
And I think it's good to evolve, right? To take the best and learn from, maybe the worst is a little bit dramatic, but things that don't suit us now, and implement certain changes that we would want to see in how we raise our kids. Absolutely. Because there's a value in those traditions and that culture that we were raised in. And I would want my children to experience that too. But there's a lot of unspoken things that perhaps, we could leave behind. So I definitely agree with you on that. And wow, so there's so much to unpack there. Like, let's go back. You are in the construction industry, which to this day, I see it tangentially, right? I'm in law, but a lot of my clients are in the construction space, the development space, and there's still a lack of women in that particular industry. How do you feel we can change that? Number one. And as women that, as we continue to evolve in our industries, how can we help the next generation so that they don't have to have the same struggles that we have had?
So first always is policy, right? Whether it's like corporate policies. I remember thinking to myself, like, we need to make our policies as a contractor, even though, we don't have paid FMLA or parental leave, and whether it's like something you have to get disability, if and when you want to have a family. The fact that you have to something to file for disability when you're growing a family, it's insane to me. So, policies that allow women to have that flexibility, right? But even if you're going to pay them for 3 months, and I remember putting myself in those shoes when I was like, what do I do when I'm not paid for 3 months? How
do you survive, right?
Right. How do you survive? And if and when, you have a spouse that, either earns more or can financially sustain that while that the mother goes on leave, then, what happens in the majority of the turnover, and I saw it happen within the industry and the companies that I was in, I wouldn't see them anymore after they had a baby.
That was a huge issue during the pandemic too. We saw a lot of women fleeing a lot of the industry.
Right. Yeah. They wouldn't come back because they were like, well, what's the point? because I have no flexibility. I have to be there 9 to 5. It requires me to work, 12-hour shifts. I can't just bring my, my pump on the job site and pump in a closet because, I need to get to my kid at a specific time.
Right.
And, daycare is very expensive. It's completely unaffordable. So we have merged it to a point where we're like, pricing out just the middle income families to either resort to leaving their demographic area, or they say, okay, I'm just going to do a pivot and open my own business. And then it takes them probably 5 years.
Right.
To ramp up, to get, bootstrap something, to start, a small business to see if it flourishes. And it's such a vulnerable time because you're raising a child, you're trying to raise a business, or you're trying to go back to work to sustain the fact that you want to create a business.
Right.
And it's like doing something with your hands tied behind your back. And I'm a great example. I did that and I thought, this is not sustainable at all. And it wasn't until, I had my situation where I was like, oh my God, how do women even bounce back from just a normal postpartum period? So, at least for Nucor, I built a policy where at least I can pay them for 3 to 6 months at 60%, something that I can average out with, continuing the overhead, because I know those people have value. And I know that if I support women project managers, there is probably an 80% chance that they're going to come back because they're going to say, you know what, they took care of me one of the most pivotal, vulnerable moments of my life, and I'm going to come back because I feel like that culture supports me. So, and that's not readily available to everybody, but it starts with the policy of whatever you can change, even if it's a little bit of help, something that encourages a woman to say, you know what, and I'm going to come back to this job. I love that they supported me and they do care about family. It's not just about the bottom dollar. And, when you invest in people, people will invest back into your company.
Absolutely. I think the culture that you build will have a monumental impact on what you can produce and how people are going to respond to what you're trying to build. Ultimately, you want people to buy into what it is that you're trying to build, because otherwise we're only one human. We eventually have to bring on other people. And the reality is, if you create a culture that people want to be a part of, they're going to want to stay with you. And there are going to be circumstances where people are going to find other opportunities, and you don't obviously want to put a damper on their growth. But the reality is, like you said, if you invest in them, they're going to also take a gamble and want to invest in you by showing you that loyalty, showing you that commitment, and growing something that you also feel passionate about. Right. You do touch on your situation, and if you can share a little bit about your story and how that has impacted what you're building right now.
Yes. So 2016, my first daughter, Sophia Grace, she was a stillbirth, and it became one of the hardest, most, I want to say not critical, pivotal moments of my life of defining who I was, when in the eyes of society, I was not a mom, but in my heart and in my physical being, I still very much felt like a mom. And it was so difficult to share with others in that moment, because a lot of deconditioning had to happen before I could bring up her story. And it would take probably a good 5 years after that. I didn't start sharing her story until 2020, when I met she's on my board, my unicorn mom, I call her, Natalie Pizarro, from Growing the Pizarros. It took 2 children, 4 years, the pandemic happening, for me to hear her story on a live on how she was honoring her own daughter, Sabrina. And I remember thinking to myself, she is creating this jewelry and she is living in her purpose, and she's turned her pain into purpose. And she is a person who, you know, like me, marketing is her background. She is putting the picture perfect image for others. And now when she has to do it for herself is finally when she talks about one of the hardest, most like difficult things that anyone could go through. And when I saw her on that live, I just knew it in my heart. I was like, this person, I don't know how, but this person is going to change and give me the courage to talk about my daughter, because I was not ready. When I lost her, I had, coincidentally, my brother-in-law unfortunately passed away from a drug overdose as well. So it was one of those things in my life where it was like, there was just so much going on, so much pain, so many things that I was like, I don't think I'm ready to share. So, you know, I did what I knew in my power was not the right thing to do, but just not talk about it, just disassociate. Because, you know, in my industry, I felt like talking about those things was going to perceive me as weak. And I didn't realize till years later that that's what makes me strong. That's what makes me powerful. That's what helps others come forward and say, oh my God, like I went through this situation and she is part of my why. She is the reason I get up every day. She is the reason I think about, you know, how to help other mothers who are trying to conceive and, you know, have multiple losses, miscarriages and infertility. And they also feel that void of like the baby they never got to hold or take home. So I feel like her story has impacted the way that I parent, the way that I am as a, you know, as a leader. I feel like when you turn your pain into purpose, you really you rise above it all. And it's the most healthiest way that you can talk about having the conversations with others.
Right. And it's so special because now you are doing what that other mom did for you. And what an amazing journey. And sometimes we don't get there in one day, a week, a month. What a grief is very, I don't know how to describe it. You know, it's very unique to the person, and everybody is on a different journey. So you were able to take such a painful experience and turn it into a teaching moment.
Right.
And then grow something that now has an impact for everyone else. That's absolutely beautiful. There's also beauty in giving someone the opportunity to not feel alone and know that this happens to women. Because like we were touching on before, we spend so much time preventing pregnancy out of fear, right? Because as we're growing older, we want to accomplish things, and that might not be everyone's experience, but I can only speak for myself. And then you get to a point where you welcome a pregnancy or want to welcome a pregnancy, and it's not easy. It's not cookie cutter for everyone. And then you're like, is it just me? But then you get to hear experiences like yours, like other women that have been, you know, outspoken about miscarriage. And you feel like you don't want to be part of that club, but you also don't feel alone. Like there are other people experiencing that.
Exactly.
So I tip my hat to you because, you know, it's not easy to share these types of experiences, but there's so much value in sharing. How have we talked about how you took that experience and then you have applied all those lessons that you've learned into Nucor, into the nonprofit that you're building. How do you see the space that you're in construction evolving, and how can, I guess, women that are not part of that field help in making that progress become a reality?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because there's work to do.
Yes. Don't worry, there's work to do in my field too. Yeah.
Right. I think it really comes back. Well, it comes back to the type of when you receive the education, right? The way that we were educated was like, okay, you know, achieve whether you're bachelor's, master's, get your PhD, and go work at a corporation for XYZ many years as you want, get all that experience, and then later on when you're more seasoned, think about like what's next. I think that all needs to go away. How you educate yourself is up to you. It's not like the standard path. Everybody's experience looks, really different. I feel like we have to focus less on what's on paper, and we have to focus more on skill set, because there is an unspoken there's an unspoken line of the skill set that like not only women but mothers bring to specific industries. And I'm a great example, because I would be like, oh my God, I can apply. I meet all this criteria, right, for specific jobs. But I would never apply for a project manager position because I was like, I can't be a project manager. But I still meet the criteria.
I don't have the formal
education. I don't have the formal education. I don't have 5 to 7 years under or I don't have a GC construction license at that time. And like I put all these like voids and pockets and try to do all the check mark things. And I feel like women still very much do that. And then what happens is we, whether we take the time to have our families, then we come back and then we try to apply for positions. And they're like, well, why do you have resume gap?
Great.
Well, because I was raising my family. Oh, were you working part-time? No, I was raising my family. Like, baby can't really survive without, full attention, at least for 9 to 12 months. So it's like just understanding that I feel that skill set is something that's underrated for women to come back to industries and be like, you know what, I can be a project manager here for like the construction field, and perhaps I can project manage for like, I don't know, a software company. The skill sets are the same. You just have to like change the verbiage really on paper.
Right.
And I feel like women, we need to like stop being so black and white about that. We have, gray areas on skill sets speak a lot more about just your 10, 15 years of experience in a project specific field.
And I think that we're seeing a push on, or a push back of just being pigeonholed to like one degree, right? You get a degree in, let's just say, marketing, and then you can't do anything else because that's your degree. You have a degree in marketing and you are in that field. But like you said, there are skills that go beyond that degree that you've obtained. Let's just be real. Mothers are the best project managers. That is what we do every single day.
Yeah.
And because I have to juggle their calendars, all of their activities, the finance, not that this is the experience for everyone, but I can speak for myself. I have to manage, what we're eating, what we're purchasing, what is going on the weekends. We are essentially the best project managers because we have to do that.
Exactly.
So why wouldn't we be able to transfer those skills to, your typical job? So I think, that is very outdated to think that if there's a gap in your work experience that you've been sitting home doing nothing. When in reality, you're learning how to care for a child that hasn't fully developmentally matured. You have to communicate with them. I mean, we do that all the time. Learning to communicate with people that don't communicate the same way that we do. So why couldn't you take those skills that you have really honed during your maternity leave or your, gap year, however you want to term it, and transition that into your typical job or business,
right?
Because we're doing that all the time. That's amazing. And what is one piece of advice that you wish, or what is one piece of advice that you would share to a mom that's thinking about starting that business or taking a leap of faith and starting something new?
I think the best piece of advice that I could offer a mom is ask for help.
Oh, that's so hard.
It's so hard.
That's so hard.
I never asked for help. I'm like, I can do this all by myself. Because I had that lone wolf mentality. I'm like, I don't need anybody. I'm gonna mother on my own terms. And I fell flat on my face when I had my son. God, I fell flat on my face so bad. And I'm glad that I fell on my face because I was just, I guess, canceling out all these dumb expectations that I had put in my mind of like what it means to be a mom or a good mom or whatever. And it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I should have asked for help. I should have asked for help for the people that I admired, who made it look so like effortless of like, whether it was on social media or in person, and they just enjoyed being a mom. Like they just seemed very happy. I wish I could have asked for help. Like, hey, how do you do, XYZ so well? Like for me, you look like you're juggling and you're doing a beautiful job at it. And, it might have been like, hey, I hired a meal prepping company.
Right.
Or I hired a nanny, which I did later in my life, which I was like, why did I take so long to ask for help?
I know.
When I was the one, and my husband too, where we were struggling like mentally just to try to, whatever, make it through a week without like feeling like completely exhausted. And we just tend not to do it because, I don't know, we put that additional pressure on ourselves. Imposter syndrome takes a grip sometimes. And actually, I wrote a book about, not imposter syndrome, but there is chapters of how I call her. She's a nosy little, and she likes to pop her head and, grab a hold of you and like say, man, you're just such a rookie at this. Like, you don't know what you're doing. Like, you could have been doing a better job. You should have been there, all of it. And I feel like that actually never changes. She'll always, I call her she'll always be there. So the way that you can, tell her to STFU in a very nice way is ask for help.
Yeah. And it's so hard. I agree. It's hard for me to ask for help because we're so conditioned to like be able to do it, or we think nobody can do it like us or like me. Like nobody could organize the drawers like me, or nobody, can make the meal. And the reality is we're going to they'll survive one day. If it's not the way that you do it, like, is it in the grand scheme of things that important when it ultimately means you have more time to do something that you care more deeply about or has a longer lasting impact, whatever the case may be. But I completely agree. I think we struggle with that as mothers, as entrepreneurs, just finding that balance of understanding it's okay to ask for help. I think that the best thing we could do is be honest about it. Just like how we were talking about before, just being honest that, we have these insecurities. We don't all have it figured out. And like being okay with taking information from people that seem to excel in that area, because I bet you that same person that excels in making motherhood look easy maybe struggles in her career or her marriage or whatever the case may be. And she can learn something from you.
Right.
So I think if we're honest about that, we can propel and help others, come to terms with what their deficiencies are. So thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I think this has been super helpful and awakening for me. I want to know how I can better serve your community too.
Well, I encourage you we're going to be doing some applications for speakers. We do the summit that I told you about March 1st or 2nd for next year. I have looked at the calendar. I just can't remember the first Saturday.
Hopefully we can post it on the
Yeah, and we have 3 panels, and it touches on all the things that Virtual Mom Collective does, which is to help mothers in the workplace, our mother mentor grants, to help mothers in the postpartum period, or even in before, like with the prepartum period, whether you're looking for the ability to become a mom one day. We actually awarded our Mother Mentor Grant on October. It's called Women United, and we were able to help support a mom who is doing her first round of IVF after loss. So we were very excited. Kelsey, kudos to you. And she just came one day she walked into one of our events, and now she's part of our community. And then the advocacy piece, which is to help talk to our congressional members on how we can help with more policies that support childcare, postpartum, FMLA, and help, mothers, because when mom is happy, everybody is happy.
I think that's a powerful note to end on. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
I will be joining that community. So
Thank you
so much.